New week of the call up here, and we are talking about the storylines for all of the American League teams as we head into camp. Of course, this would be the prospect storyline. So we're finding the angle here, things to look out for, things that we are specifically keyed in on in the prospect world that could have implications, in the early part of the season, just things we want to monitor. I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen. We did something similar last year. It's a lot of fun. I think it's a great primer for fans, and whether you're a fantasy baseball person, whether you're a card collector, whether you just want to know what's going on in the league, I think it's a great primer for the prospect and roster implications and storylines. And probably there'll be a few names that we'll bring up and you'll be like, oh, wow, I forgot about that guy. That's why it's fun to do this. We'll do a National League episode as well. But today we're talking about the 15 American League teams and the prospect relevant storylines within each of those teams.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. And I was talking to one of our guys at Just Baseball, Clay Snowden, who does great stuff in regards to the Reds, the Tigers. He did the A's for a little bit, but he just kind of bounces around. And he was talking to me about the top 10 position players in the National League Central. And he was like, what do you got going today? It's like, well, Arm and I are doing things to watch in each camp for the young guys. And his immediate reaction was, ooh, I like that. Like, it's one of those things where we get the juices flowing. Baseball is back. We get to watch Dodgers, Padres on Thursday, and then another handful of games on Friday. I think everybody wants something to monitor in each camp that you tune into on MLB TV, because this is your first opportunity to really latch on to MLB TV. I've got my things that I'm going to be keyed in on. Spring training, just like watching for the sake of baseball, is fine. But I kind of like watching spring training with a purpose.
I 100% agree. I don't. It's always nice to watch some of the best players in the game play the game, but I'd rather watch them do that when it matters. The season's long enough. We got 162 ball games. I can watch Isaac Paredes swing it during the regular season, and that's fine by me. And even when it's some of the best guys, like I saw Justin Verlander throw in spring training. It's always cool to see Justin Verlander throw, but whether he gives up 8 runs or he strikes out 10, nothing changes.
He doesn't
Nothing
care.
matters.
He's going to leave in the 5th inning anyways. It's all going according to the plan that's scripted out.
And we don't want to take anything major. You don't want to change your total assessment of a player or anything like that in spring training. But there's roles to be won. There's, I would say status to gain, especially that's why we do non-roster invitees, right? That's why teams do that. You're having an opportunity, even if you don't have a chance to make the team out of camp, to make an impression and expedite your process to the big league level as well. Those are all things to monitor.
So there are 3 concrete examples over the last 2 spring trainings that I bring to the front of the table each time. Last year, Anthony Volpe won the shortstop job for the New York Yankees in spring training. Jordan Walker proved that he was an adequate enough corner outfielder to break camp with the St. Louis Cardinals.
And hit the crap out of the ball.
And hit the crap out of the ball. And the biggest one for me was 2022 spring training. Julio Rodriguez proved that he could play center field. Scott Servais said, hey, you look really comfortable in center. You're going to the big leagues. Opening day, rest is history. J-Rod is a top 10 player in baseball. These are the type of things that we can talk about with the top prospects. It's also kind of nice to ID the 5 guys that there is pressure on in the spring, because there's no pressure on the overwhelming majority of guys that are there. There are guys trying to make the roster. Those are the ones that I want to watch.
100%. And we might as well just jump right into it and talk about those guys. You want to start with the American League East?
Let's do the American League East. I've got them sorted alphabetically by division, which is very exciting. So I'll kind of tee you up for your takeaway, and then I'll follow with mine each go around. The Baltimore Orioles are entering with a lot of surefire things, but a really young roster, and it feels like there might be some guys that are pinched out. What are you looking for?
I think the obvious one, the low-hanging fruit here is, can Jackson Holliday actually make this team? And I know that's again, it is the low-hanging fruit. I have a second storyline as well that I'll mention after, you and I go back and forth on this primary thing. Look, I think Holliday is in a similar situation in a different way to what we saw with Volpe, where if Holliday goes crazy in spring training, it's going to be really hard optically to not have him in the opening day lineup, because of the fact that they just pushed the chips forward on Corbin Burns, because they're clearly trying to win now. I mean, even with the news of Kyle Bradish being hurt and potentially missing, significant amount of time, they're canvassing the trade market again. There's been reported talks about, Luzardo and other arms. And it's like, if you're in win now mode, which they clearly are, you're going to do everything possible to put the best team forward. And if Holiday is proving that he is a better offensive option than somebody else, that we'd have to figure out whose spot he would presumably take. It'd be probably reps coming away from Westberg and some of the other guys that might be on the bench. But you're not bringing Jackson Holiday up to play 2-3 times a week. He's got to play every day. So he's got to go nuts. And that's what I'm monitoring here. I personally think it makes more sense to start him in AAA, but I also said the same thing with Jordan Walker, and then he did what he did. They did end up sending him back to AAA, but the point being, he earned an opportunity to start the season with them. I think that's got to be the biggest storyline is, can Jackson Holiday force their hand? And I think that's really the best phrasing of it. It's force their hand, because I think if he just plays all right, it makes sense to just send him to Norfolk.
Yeah, I'm with you. That was clearly the low hanging fruit, and I'm totally here to ID that and single that out. There were a couple other things that I took a gander at, and I'll call it an honorable mention. But with Bradish hurt and with Means delayed, I'm thinking that I'm going to be very locked into Chase McDermott and Cade Povich.
Yep.
Because hey, why would you run out Cole Irvin if Chase is legit better in spring training? But my big thing is the outfield pinch. Heston Kjerstad or Colton Cowser isn't making the roster. They're both big league ready. There's nothing to prove in Norfolk. So one of them is going to be unfairly optioned again.
Yep.
And I don't know which one it's going to be. I'd assume if I were a betting man and I could bet on that, I would probably say Cowser ends up being in Norfolk to open the year. I think Kjerstad has enough malleability. Heck, Kjerstad should play first, and O'Hearn should, be a bench bat. It's just one of those things where I think there's a little bit more versatility with Kjerstad versus Cowser. His values in center. Guess what? You got a good one in Mullins.
Yeah, and maybe you make a bench spot open by removing Sam Hilliard. I mean, you have Jorge Mateo, and I know they don't play the same positions, but they do overlap a little bit. You don't need Mateo and Hilliard on the same bench. Have a little bit more of a higher upside guy there. I'm with you though. I think that's another storyline there is, how do they handle that busyness of the outfield / first base situation? And I think it's again, a forcing of the hand. If Kjerstad looks really, really good, and you realize, hey, O'Hearn, we know what we're getting for better and for worse. Kjerstad, we have a little bit more upside. He could end up forcing their hand as well, and it could end up making them a little bit more willing to kick the tires on a Mountcastle trade, especially as they're maybe looking for some pitching. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and I think a lot of the young guys can either instill a little bit more confidence with the Orioles to push the chips forward, or have them kind of say, hey, let's kind of remain patient here and see how things shake out a couple months into the season.
I'm also once again asking Mike Elias to trade Kyle Stowers for pitching depth. There's no world where Kyle Stowers is a part of their future. But dude, he's way too good for AAA. He
might be pinched out of reps in AAA with how loaded the AAA roster.
It's insane, man. Move Kyle Stowers for the love of God. I know he's best friends with Adley and Gunnar and Cowser and all them, but you got to move him for the sake of his career.
I think they're hoping he rebuilds some stock in AAA just by being healthy and mashing, and then I'd imagine they have to move him at some point. And then again, I think O'Hearn ends up being that odd man out as well. The last name that I'm interested to watch, and no other team's really gonna have this many names. Right. Obviously, the best farm system in baseball. You mentioned McDermott. That's a big name to watch, because if the command is even marginally better, because we saw it start to improve in AAA and throwing more strikes there. If he's around the zone even more so in spring training, that guy could take a rotation spot. He absolutely could, or could be in some swingman type of role. Another name is Seth Johnson. I just want to see how he looks health-wise. He throwing again at the end of last year, looked pretty good. Can he be a guy that ends up? I don't know if I don't think he makes the team, but with what he could do, how he could show in spring training, maybe that makes him one of the first names up if Tyler Wells ends up struggling a little bit, or someone else goes down, or Cole Irvin is not an option, or McDermott's not throwing strikes. I think that's another name that could be a contributor for them this year.
Yeah, we might have started with the longest one here, but let's jump to the Boston Red Sox. This is one of the quicker ones for me. Yeah. Wilyer Abreu has the chance to win an everyday role. Wilyer Abreu is my guy to watch, and I'm very curious what it looks like. I'll be watching Rafaela too, but it seems like the infield is set with Casas, with Grissom, with Story, and with Devers. It's really the outfield. Is Sedan going to win the job? Is it Jaron Duran's job if he's healthy?
So that's obviously my focus, but in a little bit of extrapolating a little bit further, if Rafaela wins the job, he's playing center. And that's what they said, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Why would you have Rafaela doing anything other than playing center? It's a misuse of his value. But if he ends up making the team and playing center, now Duran and Wilyer Abreu are almost like the Spider-Man meme to a degree, right? Like they
Yes.
do a lot of this similar things. Duran, a better athlete, but Abreu, still steals some bags, plays a good
And more
corner,
pop. Yeah.
and they both can swing it and tap into a good amount of pop. And yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities there. So what do you do then? Because I think Duran was great at points last year, but so was Wilyer Abreu. So if Rafaela makes the team, now it becomes instead of a Duran versus instead of a Duran versus Rafaela competition, now it slides over and it's Duran versus Abreu. So
Yeah.
Duran almost has like a backup plan. Like he has to outplay one of those two guys. But that
Yeah.
side of it's fascinating to me too, because if Rafaela makes the club, now you have a really interesting, battle of two left-handed bats here. And I think they do potentially need another right-handed bat in the fold. So though that's what I'm kind of watching more specifically. And then a kind of passive, not that important thing is, Brian Mata. Just what does he look
Mhm.
like? I'm just curious what he looks like. That's about it.
Right. Because he was not good in
No,
AAA.
no, he was very not good, but he's been good in the past. And I just kind of want to see what that looks like.
Understood. Yankees, what do you got?
Yankees are an interesting one, but I think just the most obvious storyline here is does Austin Wells take a majority of the catcher reps? And we know he's going to play, and we know he's going to play a good deal. And I really like what we saw from him. We talked about it in the Yankees Top Prospect episode. I like what we saw once he made a slight change to the hand load, and it seemed to really help him be on time. And I think it improved the bat path a little bit, and he had a really strong finish to his big league debut. Jose Trevino's the wonderful defensive catcher that we know he is. Wells has always been considered a liability, has improved drastically behind the dish, but he's still nowhere near what Trevino is. So how do the Yankees approach that? Do they prioritize offense? Do they prioritize defense? Do they split it down the middle? What does Austin Wells' role look like? I think how they handle him in spring training and how he performs and how he catches and works with some of these pitchers, Garrett Cole, I think will be very important to how much opportunity he gets.
It's going to be a Lester David Ross thing. Like Trevino's just going to be Garrett Cole's catcher for the rest of Garrett Cole's career. I feel very strongly about that. He's going to be his personal catcher. And if Cole ever goes elsewhere, Jose Trevino is following him, much like David Ross followed John Lester. I also had Austin Wells because that is the battle. I do think that Wells and Trevino are a lot closer than Pereira to any of those outfielders. Yeah. Pereira is pinched out. His fate is sealed. Wells is not. The other thing that I jotted down is this finally the spring we see Clayton Beeter turn into a reliever? I think he can make this team as a reliever.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to kind of be this open competition, I think, for the last one or two reliever like spots. They claimed Luke Weaver off of waivers. What does he look like? I'd imagine with the Scott Efros injury now, and Lou Trevino still being out for a while as well off of Tommy John. Efros back surgery is just a killer after the Tommy John. I really feel for him that stinks because he was a nice story and he was doing really well over in Chicago. But that's a spot now where I think Beater's maybe the first man up if a spot opens up in the bullpen. And I'm eager to see Clayton Beeter the reliever because we've talked about it, like Clayton Beeter the starter. I think he could be a really special reliever.
Yeah, a guy that has, I don't know, I guess graded out of prospect status for us, for Tampa is my main takeaway. What the hell does Shane Baz look like?
Yeah,
I've got no idea what that dude is going to look like. I saw that he was throwing pens. I saw he still had that very slow, very drawn out delivery. And then I know high 90s is jumping out of his hand. I'm so curious what his role is going to be with Tampa in 2024 after missing so much time.
So it's funny you say that. Like, I just think the second he looks like he can pitch anywhere near what he's capable of pitching at like he's got a spot in that rotation, right? Like Zach Littell and Taj Bradley will move over if they have to, though. I do think Taj is. Do you think
Taj moves over? Like, I'm curious what your take is on Taj, because Taj was he was very much overmatched at points last year.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what it looks like this year. If you look at some of the underlying metrics, you look at some of the expected stats, they're a little bit more generous to him than his 5.59 ERA. And I mean, the dude threw 104 innings, struck out more than 11 batters per nine. So
Yeah.
like, and it wasn't like he was walking the world three and change there. So I mean, when you got 129 punchies and 39 walks in your big league debut, like I mean, that's kind of close to what we saw from like Hunter Brown for the
Right.
most part this season. So like, there's still a lot to like, but yeah, there were some stretches where it was like, yikes. And I think kind of the ragdolling back and forth was interesting, but I think obviously Littell would probably end up being the guy that gets phased out, or they go with some sort of 6-man rotation. I'm interested to just see how they handle the whole rotation, which
Yeah.
is an extension of the Boz question. But my question I actually brought, which I'm glad we don't have overlap on everything, is I looked at the lineup. And I want to know where Mead and Caminero fit in
Hmm.
with the idea of Brandon Lau being healthy and Isak Paredes never got traded, right? Like, and it seems like at this point, if he hasn't been, you never know with the race, but if he hasn't been traded by this point, he might not get traded. And Jose Caballero, they went out and just got to presumably play shortstop. Caminero is just not going to be an everyday shortstop. He might plug in there from time to time, but the plan is for him to play third. So we know Brandon Lau, when healthy, can hit you 35 homers.
Correct.
Mead is a phenomenal piece. We just talked about him. I think he could be an everyday player. Just one of those guys filling at the DH spot. Okay, well now then you got Jonathan Aranda, kind of the odd man out again. But DH only helps with one of those two, and that's presumably going to be Caminero. So where does Mead fit in? So that's what I'm wondering is both Mead and Caminero. How do you get these guys into the lineup? Because you look 1 through 9. I mean, you could argue that both of those guys are capable of having, I wouldn't say one of the better seasons because I think Yandy Diaz is just a machine at this point. You know what
Yeah.
you're getting from Arozarena. Paredes was an awesome bat, but you could argue that they'd be right in the middle of some of the most productive hitters in their lineup. They could be the fourth and fifth most productive hitters in their lineup conservatively, and maybe even better than that, especially Caminero.
Can you teach Caminero to catch? Like Rene Pinto and Alex Jansen is the catching tandem. Like you have to find better than that, and that has long been the Rays' issue. They haven't had catchers; they've had everything else.
They don't care.
On pre-arb deals, they just don't care about catching.
I'm watching it in Miami now, dude. The Marlins hire the Rays GM, and now they're. I mean, it was perfect for them, right? They go to
Right.
a spot where they have neglected catching for 5+ years, and now you've got Christian Betancourt. They went and got the cast off from the Rays.
Right. No, it's hilarious that Bendix, like the two guys he takes with him are Christian Betancourt and Vidal Brujan. It's so funny.
Betancourt, I was like, that's fine. Vidal, I lost some hair after that one, but yeah.
Caminero needs to be on the opening day roster. I think he is. I think he's the opening day DH, and I think Aranda is turning into a pinch bat at this point.
Yeah, and the thing is Aranda, like, we see what he does in AAA, but I think the approach kind of gets thrown out of whack a little bit. He's almost too passive when he gets.
You know what it is? It's the Miguel Vargas conversation with Aranda.
And I'd almost rather him go play somewhere where he just doesn't have to worry about shit. Like just you're in the lineup every day. Don't worry about anything and just go play and not, try to carve out a role on a contender. So I think the answer might end up being that they swing another trade going, towards the end of spring training. You don't do those late trades usually with a key player, but you could do it with an Aranda type, or, Harold Ramirez maybe.
Right.
And I think at that point, Mead could technically be on the bench, but Josh Lowe, you're probably going to want out of the lineup against lefties. Brandon Lau, you're probably going to want out of the lineup against lefties. So like you can end up mix and matching and putting Curtis Mead in there where he's getting, 350, 400 plate appearances, even as a quote unquote bench piece.
I wish I could transition to Cleveland right now because of the Aranda conversation, but I can't. We have one more team in the AL East, the Toronto Blue Jays. Here's the deal. Like, I'm going to be tapped into Thicky Tiedemann. He showed up. His lower half is fire hydrant type stuff right now. I'm going to love that. That's not my storyline to watch, though. Kevin Biggio, Addison Barger, or Relvis Martinez. Who's the third baseman? I think it should be Relvis Martinez.
It's Isaiah Kiner Falefa.
Ah,
No, I don't know. Who is it? This team broke my brain this offseason. When They brought back Kiermaier to slide Varsho back to left when Varsho's a better center fielder than he is left fielder and is
Yeah.
basically the same thing as Kiermaier, but now probably a better version being that he's younger, even when he's not playing at the best of his
And more
ability.
pop. Yeah.
They go get Justin Turner, who now clogs the DH spot.
Yes.
Can maybe play third on occasion if you want him to. They already have Santiago Espinal, Davis Schneider. They go get Daniel Vogelbach, who will also clog the DH spot. You have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who can only play first at a mediocre level.
Kind of. Yeah.
Like
He's
not even, and that's generous. And then you have all these other infielders. And you did that when you have Orelvis Martinez. And that was my question. It's like, okay, you clearly don't have confidence in Orelvis, right? Like, why else would you add all of these players? All of these guys who do similar things. I know they're proven, but you had other options too within your team. You figure like one or two of those guys are going to step up. So yeah, my question is just kind of that whole thing. Just how does it all, like I'm imagining it almost like a filter, right? Like who ends up sliding through the filter and who gets filtered out. And I think spring training is going to give us a little of that. Of course, Tiedemann for me is the question is, do they plan on wasting bullets in the minors? I think with how aggressive they were with him in the Arizona Fall League, right? He threw 70 plus pitches, I think, in consecutive outings for the first time in years and did it like 4 out of 5 outings. I think that was almost a primer to get him ready for this season. And I think there's a chance that he could end up making the team out of camp, depending on how he looks and how he feels. So that's the number one thing. But I agree. I think that the biggest question is, where do these young guys fit in, if at all? And, do they end up making some room for a Barger? I would rather see Addison Barger than Kevin Biggio at this point.
Yes.
I think Barger is more defensively versatile. I think Barger has more power. And I know what I'm getting with Kevin Biggio, for better and for worse. I think Barger could potentially give you more. And I want more upside in that role. Okay, Kevin gives me one WAR. Great. I want to see what Barger can give me. And I think the answer in the short term is Barger, because of the versatility.
Sure.
Just crushing the video yesterday, like the swing. He takes probably some of the hardest hacks in professional baseball. And it's going to come with some whiff and some frustration and things like that. But dude, he can go play right field already. It's a plus arm out there. He can play third. He can plug in at short. He can play second. Like I think he's an elevated version of what Kevin Biggio has become for them.
Yeah. One more thing on the Tiedemann situation. I don't think he controls his own destiny. I think what Alek Manoah does will directly impact Ricky Tiedemann, because you've got Gosman and Barrios up top. You know that's going to happen. Bassett, you're paying a lot of money. Kikuchi, you're paying a lot of money. But Manoah is a guy that you have not, really handed money over to yet. I think he's still pre-ARB. He might be ARB1. I think he's still pre-ARB.
Yeah.
You've got Manoah. If he looks like a liability, then you go to Tiedemann. If he doesn't look like a liability, you probably don't start Tiedemann's clock. I don't know. It's a tough one, and I don't envy that situation.
No.
Jump into the AL Central here, and this is why I wanted to transition. Aranda needs a place where he can hit every day. Kyle Manzardo found a place that he can hit every day, and he was hurt for the entirety of last year, pretty much. At the beginning of the year, he was putting up EVs that we've never seen from Kyle Manzardo before. And then he was dealing with kind of a nagging injury, and it was a limp to the finish line, really, in Columbus. Manzardo has the keys to the first base position. Naylor's going to DH. Manzardo is pretty much sharpied in at this point. It's the opening day first baseman. How does he look as an everyday big leaguer? I'm very curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a world where he could lose the job out of camp, right? Like if he really stunk it up in spring training, Manzardo could. The other is, what's the shortstop situation? Do we finally just hand the keys over to Brian Roquillo, or does Gabriel Arias, continue to get some reps over at shortstop? The other one that I'm really fascinated in.
I know what you're saying.
Rule 5 draft pick Davison De Los Santos. The hell is that going to look like, man? I'm going to try to watch every at bat. Like even when I miss at bats, I'm going to go back and watch them because I just want to know what this looks like. Like this is one of the most out of pocket Rule 5 draft picks we've had in a while. And I'm all for it. Like it's fun. Like that's what I want, more teams taking a chance. Who gives a crap? Swing for the fences, literally, with some of these Rule 5 draft picks. It's fun. If it works, you get a guy that can hit you 30 bombs. If it doesn't, all right, you lost 100 grand. They'll probably buy him back for 50. You lost 50 G's. I'm glad to see the Guardians aren't afraid of that. But I think that those are two of the key conversations here. And then the last one for me is, not that he's going to have any chance to play in the big leagues anytime soon, but Daniel Espino, do we get any sightings? Do we get to see this guy throw it all? I mean, his goals were humbling to see. Like he had a conversation. I wish I could properly attribute it.
Mandy Bell of MLB.com. It was a great
article.
article.
Count on you. Always count on you for that. And via Mandy Bell, there was just, my goal is to pitch in a game.
Yeah,
I get it. There's no reason to set your sights any higher than that when you have gone through everything that Daniel Espino has gone through, and we've barely seen him even throw. I mean, it was a big deal that he was playing catch again. But I just want to see this guy on the mound. It doesn't need to look like Daniel Espino of old, but I just want to see this guy on the mound, letting it loose and just looking like he trusts his arm, because we know how when healthy, he's arguably one of the most talented pitching. He's not arguably. He is one of the most talented pitching prospects in the game when healthy.
Yeah, I like that shout because I read that article and I was like, my heart was just breaking for that guy because he was, was it 36 punch outs, 4 walks in 18 innings in AA? And then
I was ready to anoint that guy as the top pitching prospect in baseball because the stuff was so stupid. I'm going to pull it up on another episode, like just the pitch data and explain like, he was in kind of his own area. He was right there with Andy Painter, arguably even nastier if you look at some of the pitch shapes. Like that stuff is what keeps me up at night because it's so unfair to some of these dudes that just have all the talent in the world and then it's totally out of their control sometimes.
Yeah. Jumping to the White Sox here, it's not a prospect anymore. Oscar Colas was really disappointing last year. Apparently, the White Sox wanted him to play winter ball. He said no. He worked out in Miami instead. They trade for Dominic Fletcher. They trade for Zach DeLoach.
Yeah.
That in turn creates a bunch of traffic in front of Oscar Colas. So my big question is, are we done with the Oscar Colas experience? And I think the answer might be a resounding yes, we are.
I think the answer could be a resounding yes, we are. But I think it is clear that they are not that confident in Colas at the very least, right? Like, I mean, you don't, as you mentioned, you don't go out and get 2 left-handed hitting outfielders if you don't think that, there's some concerns with Oscar Colas. And I mean, we saw, the approach is bad. The defense is bad. He's got a good feel to hit for how hard he hits the baseball. And we know he hits the baseball really hard, but there's some things that need to be sorted out there. And if he's, I'd imagine that it was probably a pain point that he wouldn't go and get more reps. And I think that's probably Chris Getz said, all right, well, we're going to go look at some other options. And if you don't perform, like we're going to lean on those other options. I think the fact that they traded Christian Mena, who I do understand has some concerns, but is extremely young and has ridiculously good secondary stuff. You trade that guy when you don't have a ton of exciting pitching prospects outside of Noah Schultz and 1 or 2 others, and you do that for a limited ceiling outfielder who's a left-handed hitter. I think that's telling in itself that, as you said, like I don't know if they're there yet, but they're getting there in terms of hey, this might not be happening with Oscar Colas, which stinks because of course I opened a box of cards a couple months ago and I pulled an Oscar Colas autograph out of 25. And it's like, do I cut my losses now? Or do I hope that this guy has a fever dream for a couple months and I sell it? I know sure as hell I don't want to keep it.
I would sell, I think.
Just take whatever I can get.
Man. No, you know what? I would hold because he's going to be in Charlotte. Charlotte's a bandbox. He might hit 15 homers before the All-Star break. And at that point, his price will be up. And it's like, oh, he's blocked by Dominic Fletcher. It's like, no, he's actually not that good.
He's
and then
they actually like defense and having an approach and other components of the game, which, by the way, Dominic Fletcher, I think, is going to fit right in and actually be a good contributor. And he is ahead of Colas immediately.
I don't even view him as a storyline. I'm like, you're just the right fielder.
No, I agree. But quickly, my storyline was can Zach DeLoach make the team? And I think that's I agree. Like it's not even a Fletcher question. I think he's in his own area, and that's why they gave up a really good pitching prospect to get him. I think DeLoach is a very comparable prospect to Colas. They're not the same type of player, but they've same level of concerns and same level of abilities and potential and things like that. Obviously, I think Colas has more upside, but I also think Deloach is a little bit more polished of a hitter, so you can offset those. I'm interested to see how those two, perform and if one can separate themselves from the other. And then can Jake Eater look more like Marlins Jake Eater? I am really rooting for him to succeed. He's a good dude. And he's, worked hard to come back from the Tommy John. He's had some phenomenal stretches through his professional career, but after the trade really struggled. If Eater throws well, he's probably going to start in AAA. If he can look solid this spring, look, there's not that many guys in his way. There's bodies, but Jake Eater's got more upside than a lot of the bodies that are currently ahead of him on the depth chart.
100%. Jumping to Detroit, there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can go with this, and
I know what you're going to say. By the way, though,
you know what I'm going to say.
I'll be honest with you. If I guessed it,
yeah, I'm going to bring it back to 2021, kind of the opening thing, like the opening of your understanding of me. One of the first guys I was in love with in like just baseball prospect lore was Dylan Dingler.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Jake Rogers and Carson Kelly are the catching tandem for the Detroit Tigers. They want to win the division. Jake Rogers and Carson Kelly as a catching tandem does not win the division.
Do not sleep on Jake Rogers.
Sorry, his .5 F4 last year in 110 games?
Was that all it was?
I think so.
2.2 casual.
Oh, all right. Sorry. Baseball Reference .7, I think.
Yeah, he had 21 pumps last year.
I know he had 21.
No, but I agree. Like, jokes aside, I think it was kind of a fever dream for Jake Rogers. I think he's a fine catcher. I think Carson Kelly is. I think that ship is
not good. He's been dead in the water for a couple of years.
I think Rogers is a decent catcher. He's a good defender. I don't think he's going to hit the way he struck out 32% of the time last year. He ran into some homers. I don't think he's going to run into as many homers. And it was still a 97 WRC plus. I'm with you. Like, they need a more well-rounded catcher to spell Rogers, and I don't think Carson Kelly's that guy.
And I think Dingler could be that, but this is the last year that I think that, because if he spends the entire year in Toledo and he's so and he doesn't force AJ Hinch's hand or Scott Harris's hand, then I think we're looking at Dylan Dingler as like, okay, maybe you're not the catcher of the future for the Tigers. So I think this is the last year where I identify Dylan Dingler as the future catcher of the Detroit Tigers. And this spring is the start of making that last impression on me. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you can go to Justin Henry Malloy defensively. Obviously, you can go to Colt Keith. He just got the extension. What does he look like every day? Where are you going?
I think once the Colt Keith extension went through, that storyline kind of went out the window because you're not paying him $2 million to go to Toledo.
Right.
Yeah, of course. I want to know what he looks like, but I want to know what every rookie that's going to play every day is going to look like. That's not as much of a storyline to me. I'm looking at a Tigers team that wants to compete, and I'm looking at areas where, okay, if it's not happening early in the year, where do you upgrade? Where could you plug somebody else in? I look at the hot corner. And look, I know McKinstry had some decent stretches last year, but I'm thinking, man, you've been using a 40-man spot on Eddie's Leonard, and Leonard swung it pretty well.
Really well after the he was DFA'd, right? He was DFA'd by the Dodgers, and then he was traded for cash considerations. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I think they basically purchased him, and I'm interested to see if he's performing well in spring training. Like, we know he can swing it. He can play a fine third base. He's not a shortstop anymore, but could that be a guy that ends up snagging a role? I know they have Veerling, and Veerling can play third too, but again, you know what you're getting offensively with Veerling and McKinstry and Andy Ibanez, right? Like, I think there's a world where Leonard could hit a little bit better than those guys, could maybe be capable of hitting 20 home runs. I think that's a high-end outcome. It might be the highest-end outcome, but I think there's a world where Leonard could carve out a role on this team as well.
Yeah, I like it. All right, jumping to Kansas City here. I went the way of actually like maybe a backhand reliever. I think a lot of the storylines about Kansas City come at the big league level with like free agent signings. So I went all the way down to Matt Sauer, the Rule 5 draft pick from the Yankees. I'm like, can this guy turn into a shutdown reliever? Huh. I don't know. Do you have a better one? Like, I was just scraping the bottom of the barrel with Kansas City.
KC was tough. And Sauer is probably one of the bigger questions, and a good one because look, he's got the fastball slider. And those are the two pitches that are just far ahead, the two best for him. And I think it ticks up, out of the bullpen more consistently. So I think he could end up being another relief piece for them. And if Sauer's a good reliever, all of a sudden this bullpen, we talked about on the Just Baseball show, like bullpen might not be bad. Like there's a lot of upside in this bullpen, especially after going to get Schreiber and some of the other pieces that they've signed this offseason. So, that's definitely one aspect of it. The area that I put and that I'm fascinated by is where does Nick Lofton fit in? Can Nick Lofton carve out a role? Mm-hmm. Because I thought he looked really good in his big league debut. And I don't know where he plays defensively. And I almost think that works in his favor to a degree, though, where it's not that he's incapable of playing anywhere. Came up as a shortstop, obviously not going to play there and has been moved off of there since. Played a lot of first base, but not because of his inability to play anywhere else. It was because that was the spot that was open. But right now you got Kyle Isbell in the outfield. You got Michael Massey, who I know you like, but did struggle last year. Yeah, I'm still optimistic on him, but he did struggle. And you got Nelson Velasquez in the lineup as well. So and even I think Maikel Garcia is very talented, but you have 3 or 4 spots that I wouldn't say are totally locked up. And MJ Melendez struggled last year, man. Like that's another spot. Like one of those guys falters, Nick Lofton's right there. I look at the bench. Yeah, you got Adam Frazier, who's kind of like a left-handed, Lofton to a degree.
That was my thing with Massey. My thing with Massey was like, if Massey struggles, it's Adam Frazier. That's the direct plug.
Yeah. So, it's probably the outfield somewhere. I just want to say, like, if Lofton hits, because he swung it well in his big league debut, a short stint, but he swung it well. Every time I watch him, he doesn't jump out, but I always come away saying that guy looks like he could be, a big leaguer. I don't know in what kind of role, but he looks like a big leaguer. I just wonder if he can grab a bench spot from Dairon Blanco or potentially, carve out a little bit of a big league role. But yeah, there's no major storylines in Kansas City because a lot of it's, somewhat clear.
Yeah, I do feel really bad for Nick Pratto. He's just, there's no space for him. And frankly, he hasn't performed enough to warrant any at-bats at the major league level.
Kind of in the Stowers realm, right?
Yeah, but Stowers is good whenever he goes to AAA. Like Pratto last year, 31 games at a 630 OPS. He just wasn't good enough. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation. Jumping to Minnesota here. Is Brooks Lee going to tell him he's ready or what?
That was literally the question I had.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway. I have no idea if Brooks Lee is ready or not. I hope they don't finagle that infield to try and, I love the term you use, shoehorn, to try and shoehorn Brooks Lee into it. He screams all-star break. Mm-hmm. He should be all-star break.
I don't think he's ready. The right-handed swing is just not there yet. The approach is not there yet. Chase rate's high. Right-handed production wasn't great. Just work on those things for 150, 200 at-bats. Defense could even come along a little bit. You're probably going to need him to get more reps at other positions too, because he isn't playing an everyday shortstop. I don't really know what the plan would be when he comes up, so they'd probably want to get him some reps in other spots. So I don't think he should be up. But again, it's one of those guys that if he does play out of his freaking mind, it would put some pressure on them and force their hand a little bit. The other was the guy we just talked to. How do they handle Matt Canarino? And if you're just stumbling upon this episode, definitely go check out the interview with Canarino.
Great listen.
One of my favorites in a while. Great dude. Engineer. Just nerding out about pitch shapes with him was a blast, but also just very eloquently talking about his process and everything that he's overcome. But to be straight with you, he's got 3+ pitches and he's funky. And look, this is a guy that you probably don't want to waste bullets in the minor leagues, and a guy that's ready to contribute in any way. So how does Canarino look in a game setting? And if he dominates, do they say, hey, you know what? Forget stretching you out as a starter, which Matt mentioned they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. We got a spot for you in the bullpen, and we think you can be ready to help us right now.
Another one is Junior Severino that I want to highlight. This guy hit bomb after bomb after bomb, and there are clearly holes there, but Severino is not a top 10 prospect in this system. For me, he screams bench power bat. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how they feel about Jose Miranda coming into this year.
Yeah, because that's a big one too.
Yeah, if they don't think that Miranda can contribute at all, maybe move him at his lowest value because you've got a guy that hit 35, 37 homers in the minor leagues last year
Yeah.
in Junior Severino, just kind of waiting for that late game pinch hit appearance. And you give him 10 pitch hit appearances and he goes yard once. Feel great about that guy.
There you go.
So, all right, jumping along to the AL West at about 39 minutes into this. We're making great time, by the way. AL West, Houston, really tough to find one, but I went to your guy, Joey Loperfido.
Nice.
They are so good. There are no questions about the rotation, about the lineup. The small questions that I may have are on the bench. And I'm like, who brings versatility that could make the team out of camp? It's a guy that is hit at every level in Loperfido.
And a guy that, can play pretty much every position. He doesn't play a great center field, but he can play center field. He can play left. He can play right. He can play first. He can play second. Like pretty much everything but the left side of the infield. And they don't need anybody on the left side of the infield. So it's somewhat perfect. And Lope can steal bags. Like I'm obviously biased, but I look at the bench and I'm like, Gray Kessinger.
Yeah, like I saw Gray Kessinger. I was like, how do we get Gray Kessinger out of here?
Like, no offense to Gray, like bias over here, but I think Joey, can snag that role. That's definitely something I want to see because, if they actually give him a long look in camp, Joey just seems to be the kind of guy that rises to those types of occasions. And I think will make a strong impression with the power, with the ability to get on base. And look, he's a great bench piece because he's a left-handed bat. They don't have a ton of them, by the way. Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez are the only left-handed bats, and then Singleton on the bench. Yeah, so that's it. So, you have a guy that can plug in to left, to center, to second, to first, and be a left-handed bat if someone goes down or, whatever it may be. I think that's important. But mine was actually a much less exciting, but, again, an important role on this team is, can Trey Cabbage overtake John Singleton for his role, which is that left-handed power bat off the bench? And I think the answer is yes with a good spring. I love the Singleton story, and I don't want to see him lose his job. And I hope that if he does, he gets an opportunity elsewhere because I love the Singleton story. I will root for him.
And I love that it's happening in Houston too. Yes. Like it happened in Milwaukee initially, but being back in Houston and the fact that he may make this team out of camp, I'm all about.
Which is awesome. And like he was on the team last year and he didn't hit the way that we were hoping, but he still did some good things, had some good moments. But I look at Trey Cabot and I'm like, he does a lot of things that John Singleton does in terms of being able to hit the ball really hard, being able to walk. And he's more athletic. And I think that might end up, if he swings it well, he may end up taking that Singleton role. But that's kind of the less sexy storyline I'm kind of looking at because I'm all in on Trey Cabbage. Yeah. I will watch that guy play in South Korea if he goes over there at some point.
With the NC Dinos, I'm totally in on that. All right, moving on to the Angels. Kyron Paris is not ready. That is a non.
I got roasted. You remember when I got roasted for that?
You got killed for that for some reason.
It's I just said, why are they doing this? He's not ready. And
they're just like, don't you like fun? It's like, no, I don't like it when a guy OPS is 400.
I don't like stunting development.
Yeah. So I don't want to make Kyron Paris making the team a story because he should go to Salt Lake.
Yes.
Ben Joyce.
Bang.
They're spending a lot of money on the bullpen. They have a guy that sits 102. Now, granted, he sprays 102, but he sits 102 in the pen. I want to watch every pitch Ben Joyce throws this spring. I want to see him in Anaheim.
That's all I have is Ben Joyce health. But then I also have just a list of names that are all hilarious that you probably forgot about, and the Angels have all of them. So which of these guys survive roster cuts? Here you go.
Yeah.
These names are so fun. Evan White.
Yeah.
Miguel Sano.
Yeah.
Francisco Mejia. Hunter Dozier. Idrit Adrianza.
Yep.
Drew Pomerantz.
Yep.
Hunter Strickland. Tayron Guerrero. And Zach Plesac. Plesac will survive.
Did you see my tweet, by the way?
No.
I tweeted out, I'm fascinated in the 2024 Salt Lake Bees, and I had pretty much all of those names.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I knew this would be right up your alley. That's why I had it ready to
Well,
go.
and you
But
pair them with Kyron Paris and Jordan Adams and possibly Joe Adele. I'm like, what's going on here?
dude, this grouping of players that a couple of which I was positive were out of the league. Um, I honestly would have assumed that like four of these guys were not even going to be on a team this year. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited to watch that. I love the random names that I thought were out of the league. Teron Guerrero was like my favorite
Oh,
100 where the hell is it going guy when he came up with the Marlins for a little bit.
so I saw him last year and he was like dotting 94. I'm like, this is not Tyrone Guerrero. That's not who I was sold on. All right, moving on to Oakland here. Got a couple more for me. Clear as day. Daryl
Yep.
Ornelas is the shortstop on opening day. What do you look like?
Mm-hmm. I've never verbatim, but I guess the non-prospect aspect, like kind of prospect, non-prospect is, what does Tyler Soderstrom look like?
Soderstrom. That was my second name.
And
Yep.
does he start playing more first base? Right? Like, do we see this guy catch less now and focus more on hitting? I'm still a big believer in Tyler Soderstrom's bat. Don't forget, he's going to be 22 the entire season. Like
Yeah.
this guy's young, a high school guy that's going to be 22 for the duration of the season. It was ugly. It was not good. He's very aggressive, but he's a good field to hit and good power and I think a great swing. What does it look like in terms of how they use him? What's his role going to be? That's something I'm definitely interested in monitoring. I'm just, I still am just so confident in the potential of that bat. I feel like he's become very forgotten,
Yeah.
and I hope that he can change that a little bit with what he is capable of offensively. But then the other side of it is, I mean, there's a handful of just like arms that I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by. Like, can one of them make a leap this year of including their Rule 5 draft pick, Mitch Spence? Like, he's a fine arm. Like, Medina's no longer a prospect, but like, can Luis Medina? He
Mhm.
was okay last year. Like, it wasn't a disaster. Waldachuk out for season, unfortunately, with flexor tendon surgery, but
How
there's
about
a
Mason
handful of
Miller, the
guys.
closer? Mason Miller, the closer is
Oh
interesting.
yeah, that's a big one. Does Mason Miller just throw 800 miles an hour
He
in one
might.
inning spurts?
The Sid Finch thing. Yeah, he could.
He could.
Oh, all right. Two more teams. Seattle, you could go the Emerson Hancock route. You
Yeah.
could go the Bryce Miller, Brian Wu route. I decided to stay away from that. I went the Samad Taylor route. You know, I'm a big fan of what he can bring. This guy is not going to be asked to do much, but he is absolutely worth having on the 26-man roster. He is absolutely worth the second base, all three outfield spots that he can play, and game-changing speed. This guy can be that seventh inning pinch runner and then play lights out defense anywhere you put him for the last 3 innings of the game. And I think that guy is trying to win a spot, and I think he will win a spot this spring.
Who does he displace? Because I agree. I think he's got a fun skill set, and I think he's a unique player. Does he displace Luis Urias? Dylan Moore, I will not accept as an answer. That's one of my favorite players.
So I ID'd Luis Urias. I was like, yeah, what is
I don't think
Luis
he's ever going to
Urias?
get back to Milwaukee, Luis Urias.
No, I don't think so. If it was going to happen, it would have happened with that change of scenery in Boston, and it just didn't. It was like really bad. So yeah, I ID'd Luis Urias, and I was like, you know what? There's a level of dynamicism that Samad brings that Luis Urias does not have.
I like it. And then, I mean, I was looking at Samad. I also, where does Emerson Hancock fit in? Because I look at the rotation, and I think he's kind of going to be that alternate pitcher, right? Because you're going to have some sort of innings limit on Wu and Miller, I think, especially Wu. And guys have flare ups all the time. Can he plug and play? Do you consider Emerson Hancock out of the bullpen, considering he's had some arm issues of his own? Because right now you have a couple bullpen spots kind of taken right now by failed starters in a Jackson Kowar, who I'm also really fascinated to see. Like, this is kind of the last gasp for Jackson Kowar. What does it look like with him out of the bullpen? Austin Voth, like that's a spot where like they might not want Hancock in AAA anymore, and they might say, hey, we think you can be a better long relief or plug in, option than Kowar and Voth. So what does a role for Emerson Hancock potentially look like? And can he earn one?
I like it. All right, last team, the Texas Rangers, the reigning World Series champs. Two words. You know what they are.
Wyatt Langford.
Langford. Yes, that's it. I just wrote down Wyatt Langford. Period.
Yeah, the other actually one last thing on the Oakland A's. Can you believe that
Yeah.
they still have JJ Schwartz?
No way. The Florida kid.
Yeah, that was supposed to be like the greatest thing ever.
Oh, is he
Supposed to
going to
be-
compete
He
for
was
the
like
catching
Wyatt
job
Langford.
with
He was Wyatt Langford before Wyatt Langford, and then like the freshman year, and then it just fell off after that.
him and Buddy Reed? JJ Schwartz
Buddy
and
Reed.
Buddy Reed.
Yeah, but back to Langford. Yeah, I mean it's what does this guy have to do to make the team realistically? They've said that he has a chance to do it. He's going to have
Does
to
he do it?
obviously do exactly what he did last year
Yeah.
in AAA and AA and everything. And who does he displace? What does it look like? But I'm just excited to see Wyatt Langford uh, try to prove himself as a guy that's ready to play from opening day.
Yes, 100%.
That's it.
That's it. We just got through the American League in 50 minutes.
I mean, can we just? I hope the listeners out there are realize how hard this is for us to do that, to be under an hour in an episode. We have not
So,
done that in a minute. So, good job. It was a lot of fun. We'll
yeah,
be
it was
doing
great.
the American League, or excuse me, the National League next. And so keep an eye out for that. Look out for the National League tomorrow or the day after that. We will have it out. And then we are continuing to truck away at the top 100 update. We're going to have a conversation about kind of the new projection and scale of how we're going to kind of approach the prospect side of things and future value and things like that. So we'll have a fun conversation around that in the future, and a lot of fun stuff to look forward to on the call. But if you can leave a rating, help us grow the show. A review would be awesome. Really appreciate it. Subscribe to the YouTube and check out all of the prospect lists and everything at justbaseball.com. Top 100 will be out by the end of the month. Very excited about that. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking National League prospects with you on the next episode.